She was barely
Sacagawea was in
16 years
horrible
old,
pain during
a
Lewis and
newborn
Clark's
strapped to her
expedition,
back,
and Sia was
thousands of
one tough
miles of
woman. When
uncharted
she was a
wilderness
teenage
stretching
mother,
ahead,
this Shoshone
and a husband who
explored
beat
across
her
America
so
as
savagely
part of
that
Lewis
even
and Clark's
hardened
famous
frontier
expedition.
explorers had to step
To
in and
her
stop
nightmare
him.
marriage,
Her
there's
name
much more
was
to know
Sacagawea,
about this
and the
indigenous.
agony she endured during the Lewis and Clark
In
expedition
1788,
wasn't
in the
just from the
mountainous
brutal
terrain on the
terrain
border,
or the freezing
Sacagawea was
temperatures.
born into the
Scholars
Shoshone
recently
tribe,
uncovered something far more disturbing,
an
a
enemy
horrific
tribe, the
medical
Hidatsa,
condition
viciously
inflicted by the
attacked her
very
people.
man who claimed
During
to
the
be her
raid,
protector.
several of her tribe
This
were
is the
murdered.
story that American history books sanitized, the truth that the expedition's
In some versions
own
of her
journals
story,
tried
the
to bury,
Hidatsa treated
and it's
Sacagawea
time
on
you
a servant
finally heard it.
for 3 long
Before we
years.
expose what
Then
really
when she
happened
turned
to this
16, her
remarkable
teen
woman,
bride,
hit that
then as an
subscribe button
indentured
and tap
servant.
the bell icon.
So they sold
Here
her
at
to a
History
man
Exposed
who won
TV, we
Sacagawea
dig up
while
the stories
gambling.
that others left in the ground.
Whatever
You
the
won't
truth,
want to miss
violent
what comes
assault
next.
against women
Now,
wasn't
let's uncover
interested
the
in asking
buried
for
truth.
Sacagawea's permission.
Torn
He
from
made
her
money
people,
by selling
the
women
rugged
into
mountains
slavery.
straddling present-day Montana and Idaho
Clearly,
formed the
Charbonneau.
backdrop of
So it shouldn't be
Sacagawea's
surprising
earliest
that
memories.
Sacagawea wasn't
Born
actually
around
his only
1788
wife,
into the
Shoshone
Lemhi
Nation.
Shoshone tribe,
He was
she
also
spent her
30
childhood
years
learning to
older than
forage,
Sacagawea.
fish, and
In
navigate the
November of
treacherous Rocky
1804,
Mountain terrain.
shortly after her
Her
wedding,
people called this
Sacagawea met
unforgiving
photographers
landscape
and
home,
explorers.
and young
Captain
Sacagawea
Meriwether
thrived in
Lewis
it.
and Captain
But her
William
innocence
were on a
shattered when
mission
she
to
was
explore
approximately
America's
12 years
newly
old.
acquired lands
A rival
and create a
tribe, the
map. However, their
Hidatsa,
team
launched
wasn't
a
quite
devastating
complete.
raid on her
The men
village.
needed indigenous
Warriors
guides
swept
and
through the
interpreters.
encampment
The pair
with
didn't think
terrifying
much
speed.
of Toussaint Charbonneau,
Sacagawea
but they did
witnessed
like
her
his
relatives
wife.
cut down
Since
before her
Sacagawea
eyes.
journey,
The screaming,
Charbonneau
the
was
chaos,
something of a
the
fourth
blood
wheel.
soaking into familiar ground.
Rattlesnakes
Then,
during her
rough
labor
hands
to
seized
help
her.
speed up
She
her
was
birth.
ripped from everything
Further
she
proof
knew
that
and dragged hundreds of
While
miles
most new
eastward to
mothers would
Hidatsa
take it
territory
easy,
near present-day
Sacagawea,
North
she set
Dakota.
out
For
with Lewis
3
and Clark.
agonizing years, she existed as little more than a servant, a
Everyone
child
knew it would be
laborer,
hard.
a captive with
Sacagawea
no
had it
voice and no
especially
power.
rough. As a
Some
new
historical
mother
accounts
time,
suggest her treatment was brutal beyond measure. She had no
Sacagawea was
family to
released.
protect her,
Clark
no
immediately
tribe to
developed a
advocate
soft
for her
spot
release.
the boy,
Then,
nicknaming
at
him
16,
Little. He
her
was
captors
helpful, too.
decided she had
His
new
presence
value,
immediately
not as a
put other
worker,
tribes at
but as a
ease,
commodity,
not to harm.
sold to a monster. The Hidatsa
Sacagawea
either sold
interpreted
or
between
gambled
the
away
explored,
Sacagawea
clean,
to a
made
French-Canadian
herbal
fur
medicine,
trader named
and basically
Toussaint
kept
Charbonneau.
everything running.
Historical
But
records
soon,
differ
she'd
on the
encounter
exact
something
transaction,
chilling
but
that
the
would shake
outcome
even
remained
her
the same.
steadfast
This
As the group
teenage
approached
captive
new
became the
terrain,
property of a man
Sacagawea
3
realized
decades her
that she
senior.
recognized that
Charbonneau's
the Hidatsa
reputation
kidnapped her
preceded
all
him.
those years
He had a
ago.
documented
She was
history of
close.
violence against women. Some sources indicate
As
he
a sign of
profited
how
from
tough
human
she'd become
trafficking,
throughout her
and
life,
Sacagawea
she
wasn't
mentally
even his
important
first
place.
Shoshone wife. He'd already taken another woman
May
from the same
14th,
tribe. She
Sacagawea's
had no
husband
say
was
in this
steering one of
arrangement,
the boats
no
when a
consent,
gust of
no
wind
escape.
suddenly scared that,
At 16,
in a panic,
this
he nearly
traumatized
overturned
survivor of
the entire
kidnapping and
boat
enslavement
and
found
saved
herself
the day.
bound to a man who would make her life a living
Valuable
nightmare.
papers and
The
much needed
explorers
sat
arrive.
paralyzed by fear.
November 1804
Sacagawea
brought an
bravely dove
unexpected
into the
development.
water and rescued
2
us.
American
William
captains,
Lewis wrote that
Meriwether Lewis
Charbonneau
and
was
William
a
Clark,
man of no
arrived at the
peculiar
Hidatsa
men
Mandan
in the
villages
world.
with an ambitious mission. President Thomas
But as
Jefferson had
comically inept
tasked
as
them
he
with
was, a chilling
exploring the
passage
vast
in the
territories
explorer's
acquired
journals.
through the Louisiana
A month
Purchase.
after she saved
They
the
needed to map
expedition
the
went
continent,
out of her
find a route to the
senses.
Pacific Ocean,
Historians
and
now
document
believe that she had
everything they
gonorrhea.
encountered. But
Clark
they
was
faced a
so
critical
unimpressed
problem.
by Charbonneau's
Their
behavior
expedition
during his
required
wife's
indigenous
frequent
guides and
the fault of her
interpreters to
husband,
navigate
as I am
unfamiliar
now
lands
convinced.
and communicate with tribes they'd never
To
encountered.
continue the journey.
Charbonneau
But
offered his
shortly after,
services.
Lewis and
The
Clark's
captains
crew
weren't
reached
impressed
the
with him.
lands of the
They found him
Shoshone.
cowardly and incompetent. However, his young
The last time
Shoshone
she
wife caught their
recognized self,
attention.
but this time
Sacagawea
they
spoke
came
languages
rushing
they
out,
desperately
and her
needed.
stony reserve
She knew the
finally
Western
broke.
territories.
What's more, the
She
land
understood the
wasn't the only
customs of
thing
tribes that could
Sacagawea
either help
recognized.
or destroy
While
their
there,
mission.
she
They
met a
hired
girl who'd
Charbonneau
also been
primarily to
abducted
access
by a rival
Sacagawea's
tribe.
invaluable
But
skills.
Sacagawea must
A
have
mother's
experienced
impossible
incredibly
journey.
mixed emotions
Just months
as she
before the
heard about the
expedition
life she
launched,
could have had
Sacagawea gave
another
birth to her
familiar
first
face.
child.
Chief
A baby
Kamehameha
boy named
was her own
Jean-Baptiste
brother, who had
Charbonneau
danced
entered
for
the
the
world in
joyful sight.
February
And Lewis
1805.
notes that all
According
those
to
who were
expedition
present
journals,
were- Another diary
Sacagawea
entry
consumed
says that when
crushed rattlesnake
Sacagawea
rattles during her
that the chief
difficult
was her
labor,
sibling,
a traditional
she would
remedy
cry.
believed to speed
The
delivery.
siblings talked
Most
privately,
new mothers
and
would
for the
need
rest of
months
the
to
night,
recover.
Sacagawea
Sacagawea had weeks. In April 1805, she strapped her 2-month-old infant to her back and departed with the core of discovery. Think about that for a moment. A teenage mother, a newborn baby, thousands of miles of wilderness filled with grizzly bears, hostile leather, raging rivers, and unknown dangers. She walked into history carrying the future on her shoulders. The baby who saved the mission. Captain William Clark developed an immediate affection for little Jean-Baptiste, nicknaming him Pomp or Pompey. But this wasn't mere sentimentality. The baby served a crucial strategic purpose. When Indigenous tribes spotted the expedition approaching, they assessed whether these strangers posed a threat. A war party wouldn't bring a woman and infant. Sacagawea's presence with her baby signaled peaceful intentions more effectively than any diplomatic speech could. The child literally kept the expedition alive. Meanwhile, Sacagawea proved indispensable in countless ways. She interpreted between the explorers and various tribes. She foraged for edible plants when food ran scarce. She prepared meals, crafted herbal medicines, and mended clothing. She identified geographic landmarks and advised on navigation routes. She made the impossible look effortless. Returning to haunted ground. As the expedition pushed westward, Sacagawea began recognizing the landscape. The mountains, the rivers, the valleys. This was the place where the Hidatsa had kidnapped her years ago. She was retracing the path of her own abduction. According to the journals, she showed no outward emotion upon this realization. No tears, no breakdown. After everything she'd endured, she'd learned to lock her pain inside. But her composure was about to crack. Disaster on the water. May 14, 1805, nearly ended the entire mission. Charbonneau was steering one of the boats when a sudden gust of wind struck the sail. Instead of responding competently, he panicked completely. The vessel began capsizing, threatening to dump irreplaceable supplies, scientific instruments, medicines, and the expedition's precious journals into the churning water. While her husband sat frozen with terror, Sacagawea leaped into action. She plunged into the frigid river and retrieved the critical documents and equipment as they floated away. Her quick thinking saved materials that couldn't be replaced, items the entire expedition's success depended upon. Lewis wrote afterward that Charbonneau was the most timid waterman in the world. But his scathing assessment of the husband highlighted something else, his growing respect for the extraordinary wife. The horrific truth revealed. A month after saving the expedition, Sacagawea collapsed. She became dangerously ill, suffering from severe abdominal pain, high fever, and periods of delirium. The journals describe her condition as going out of her senses. Modern historians analyzing these symptoms have reached a disturbing conclusion. The evidence strongly suggests Sacagawea was suffering from a serious infection, likely transmitted to her by Charbonneau. She was gravely ill because of her own husband. Clark grew so disgusted with Charbonneau's behavior during his wife's illness that he wrote something remarkable in his journal. If she dies, it will be the fault of her husband, as I am now convinced. Think about that statement. A frontier explorer in 1805 essentially accused this man of killing his wife through neglect and abuse. The captains saw everything, they documented it, and they blamed him. The beaten wife.
Clark recorded that Charbonneau beat Sacagawea so brutally that the explorers were forced to intervene. He wrote that the wife of Charbonneau was badly treated by him simply for speaking to another Indigenous woman. They reproved him severely for his brutality. Picture this scene. Two military captains on a dangerous wilderness mission felt compelled to confront a civilian about domestic violence in 1805, an era when such abuse was rarely addressed publicly. The beatings must have been severe enough to shock men accustomed to frontier violence. Sacagawea endured this abuse while pregnant, while nursing an infant, while navigating thousands of miles of hostile territory, while carrying out duties essential to everyone's survival. And she kept going. The impossible reunion. When the expedition reached Shoshone territory in August 1805, Sacagawea's carefully constructed emotional walls finally crumbled. She recognized the land of her childhood. Then she encountered people from her past, including a young woman who'd also been captured by the Hidatsa but had managed to escape and return home. Sacagawea stood face to face with the life she might have lived. But nothing prepared her for what came next. The expedition needed horses to cross the mountains. They arranged to meet with the local Shoshone chief, Westward. When Sacagawea entered the tent to serve as interpreter, she suddenly stopped. She stared at the chief's face. Then she burst into tears, rushed forward, and threw her blanket over him in a traditional gesture of affection. Westward was her brother. The siblings hadn't seen each other since that horrific raid years earlier. Neither knew whether the other had survived. Now, impossibly, they stood reunited on the very land where they'd been torn apart. Lewis noted that everyone present was moved by the family reunion. For the first time on the expedition, Sacagawea allowed herself to weep openly. She spent that night talking privately with her brother, crying repeatedly as the full weight of everything she'd lost finally overwhelmed her. The whale and the ocean. After crossing the Rocky Mountains, a journey that pushed the expedition to the brink of starvation, the travelers finally reached the Pacific coast in November 1805. Sacagawea rarely made personal requests. She worked, she endured, she survived. But when she heard that a massive whale had washed ashore nearby, she insisted on seeing it. This was her only recorded demand during the entire journey. She stood on that beach, gazing at the monstrous creature and the endless Pacific waters. The journals describe it as one of her happiest moments. A young woman who'd experienced unimaginable suffering, finally witnessing something magnificent. She couldn't have known it would be one of her last joys. A mother's sacrifice. The expedition returned east in 1806. Clark had grown so attached to young Pompey that he offered to adopt and educate the boy. Initially, Sacagawea declined, but years later, living in St. Louis and recognizing the opportunities Clark could provide, she made a devastating choice. She left her son with Clark so he could receive an education and a future she couldn't otherwise give him. Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau grew up to become an explorer, adventurer, and multilingual frontiersman, his mother's spirit living on through him. Death at 24. In 1812, Sacagawea gave birth to a daughter named Lisette, but her health was failing. She'd suffered repeatedly throughout her life, from captivity, from abuse, from illness contracted from her husband, from the physical toll of her incredible journey. That December, she became gravely ill. Historians believe she contracted typhoid fever or a similar infection. On December 20, 1812, Sacagawea died. She was approximately 24 years old. The woman who'd crossed a continent, saved an expedition, reunited with her lost brother, and sacrificed everything for her children's futures was gone. Charbonneau, that vile man, lived for decades afterward. He married at least 5 more women. His final bride was 14 years old when he was 70. Her eternal legacy. Despite the expedition's journals sometimes downplaying her contributions, Sacagawea's legacy proved impossible to bury. Her face now appears on the US dollar coin. The river where she saved those critical documents bears her name. Statues honor her across America. Her name, depending on translation, means bird woman or boat launcher, both fitting for someone destined to journey beyond horizons others feared to approach. Everything we know about Sacagawea comes from journals written by others. She left no documents in her own words. Her voice was filtered through the perspectives of men who couldn't fully understand what she endured. But her actions spoke loudly enough to echo through centuries. Sacagawea's story proves that the most important figures in history are often those whose suffering was deliberately hidden. She deserved better from her own time. She deserves to be remembered fully by ours. If this story moved you, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth. Subscribe to History Exposed TV so you never miss another buried story that the world tried to forget. What part of Sacagawea's journey shocked you the most? Drop a comment below. We read every single one. Until next time, keep questioning history.